Tell me, Ambassador, would you like to know why humans try so hard to maintain peace? Well, most people assume you're simply naturally peaceful, or at least very risk-averse, said the crab-like creature in almost English. The human minister chuckled. Have you ever known a human to be particularly risk-averse, or to back away from a good brawl? Not really. No, it's more complicated than that. She paused. It's not because we fundamentally dislike or disapprove of violence, or that we are afraid of defeat. We are afraid of something worse. We fear victory. Fear victory? Why would you ever fear victory? More precisely, we fear what comes after victory. The memories of the killing. The psychological scars. You see, when humans fight a war, we fight to win. Everyone fights to win. No, they don't. They think they do, but they would back away from things a human leader would do in 100 times without blinking. Vaporizing cities, creating artificial plagues, she trailed off. You don't really want to know. But you see, we will do atrocious things, and then we'll regret it, but still do it, knowing we'll regret it. We don't fear victory itself, but we fear having done what we are willing to do to achieve it. He was at a loss for words. Our last major war before First Contact killed over 126 million humans, all told. The ambassador's eyes instinctively tried to react. We demolished each other's cities. We killed indiscriminately. We erased millennia-old cultural heritage. Do you know what it was over? I assume it must have been wrong. Fishing rights. A tiny territorial dispute. 2 lines on a map. 6 degrees of angle, and a web of hundreds of tangled alliances. It started small, but it didn't stop escalating until every military force on Earth was involved. And the death toll could have been 40, 50 times worse, or extinction. We managed to hold ourselves back from that. We won't quite do anything, I suppose. There was no possible response. Have you ever heard the term mutually assured destruction? I hope not. It was how we kept from wiping ourselves out once we invented nuclear fission weapons. We built thousands of them, and pointed them at each other on a hair trigger. He clattered incoherently. Indeed, but it did work. No one was willing to actually use a nuclear weapon because the inevitable result would be that everyone and everything would be destroyed. The only way to stop a human from using a weapon when she thinks it is the only way to avoid defeat is to convince her that doing so will bring more harm to her own people than being defeated. Effects on the target never enter into it, until the regret sets in later. In the moment, the psychological calculation is that simple and that uncaring, and we can be surprisingly elastic about what we consider more harmful. How did you ever survive? By pointing thousands of nuclear weapons at each other, and eventually by learning to avoid conflict. Our racial knack for diplomacy really developed in the same century as World War III. Mostly in the decades spent rebuilding after it. We briefly thought each of the First and Second World Wars would be the last big war. It took yet another shock to make us finally realize we weren't going to stop escalating things. We're never going to outgrow our inner beast, and learn to fight one for one like civilized people. So we avoided all conflict, insisted on diffusing everything before it could spark war, made rules and committees and courts covering every possible dispute. Our pacifism is learned. At least you did learn. Eventually, even nuking ourselves didn't do it. You actually used them? Twice. Twice? And that was when we first invented them. We didn't get rid of them after that. No. We came up with mutually assured destruction instead. I can hardly believe this is the same species who will sit in council chambers for years to come to deal with a single planet state with a population under 3 billion. Like I said, we learn to avoid conflict. You never know when it could escalate to make you do something beyond anything you'd ever wanted. Sometimes, I swear humans could have made a non-aggression pact with the locusts. We wouldn't have. Well, of course, no one could. That's not what I meant. The beast is still there, Ambassador. We stopped fighting, but that doesn't mean we got rid of our weapons, or our ideas of war. Well, no one can afford. We never did get rid of the nukes. You still have 80,000 or so on inventory. Variable yield, up to 10 gigatons for the big ones. Remarkably clean nowadays, at least by comparison. She took a drink and continued softly. Like I said, we don't fear doing terrible things. We fear having done them. That won't stop us if we're pushed far enough, or if we feel justified. The thing you should be most afraid of is making us feel justified, because then we won't regret it. There was silence. The ambassador's shell was turning a distinct mauve. Good night, Ambassador. It was almost a whisper. Louder. Don't forget your umbrella. The door opened and shut, briefly letting in the sound of London rain as the minister finished her whiskey.